to X-Files Rewatch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And I do believe you have some form of news.
Yes, it's a bit of an obscure one, but I did see something on Twitter that I thought fans might be interested in.
Okay.
Funko Pop, you know, the little vinyl toys?
Unfortunately.
Yep, they have announced that they are releasing ones of Mulder and Scully.
Ooh.
I believe they are available to pre-order now from Amazon and various other places where you can get your Funko Pops. It is just Mulder and Scully at present, and they're due to come out mid-August, I think. So they might already be out by the time this airs. But yeah, get in there if you want them, I guess.
The other thing we could talk about, because I think we kind of alluded to it last week, is we went to see Alien Romulus.
We did indeed.
Nothing to do with the X-Files this time. And the frustrating, almost decent Alien film.
Interestingly, there is a kind of connection with the second episode we're going to talk today. I was going to bring that up, actually.
Okay, we'll save it till then.
Yeah.
That's okay, I'm curious.
But yeah, what did you think of Alien Romulus on the whole, then? There is a bit of overlap because it's aliens.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the sequel to Alien we never got, which is interesting, given they've taken a long time to get the tech looking right. It looks like a sequel to Alien, mixed with a bit of aliens.
And it does specifically make reference to the events of the original movie.
Yeah, it's the sequel that you would have expected them to make after Alien. Aliens is actually really odd when you look at it, of being the sequel. Feels kind of a more obvious sequel.
Aliens had the kind of like 80-odd year time hop with her being in stasis.
59.
Was it 59 years? Yeah. This one's only set 20 years after Alien.
Yeah, and they specifically go to the wreck of the Nostromo and pick something up.
I'm sure you can imagine.
Well, no, to be fair, I was actually, because I missed that initial trailer, I wasn't sure exactly what they got hold of until they opened it up. And then because, oh, okay, they've got that.
Yeah, there was an early trailer for it with a voiceover that, well, I know the actress passed away, but sounded a lot like it was meant to be Ash talking about what went on the Nostromo.
I've only had a few reviews of Romulus, and that comes up in almost every single one of them of, this is deeply weird and creepy, did you have to do this?
The Uncanny Valley aspect.
The Uncanny Valley. Getting a specific person back in that you didn't need to.
It is a kind of common thing now, because they did it in Star Wars with Peter Cushing's Grand Moff Tarkin.
And indeed Carrie Fisher, where they euthanized her.
Yes, true.
I mean, I think in terms of filmmaking, that's the faux pas that a lot of people are upset about. Like, there's a line that's shameless fan service that does not belong in this film, but it's said anyway.
Yeah, I know the one.
You know the one I mean. In terms of Alien fandom, a lot depends on your stance on Prometheus. We've basically ignored Alien Covenant. We're kind of very much...
Thank God.
I mean, you can make the cases in there because of how they've wired Prometheus into this. They don't make a lot of what Alien Covenant set up, and everyone sort of said, no, that we're not meant to understand them. We're not meant to know where the alien comes from. Or if we do, it's meant to be beyond human understanding. Not meant to be a robot has said, I'm going to make the alien.
I've got to admit, I don't think it spoils a horrendous amount. A friend of mine watched this the day before it came out, and he warned me that it maintains the tone of Alien for a good long time, then turns into Prometheus, then turns into Resurrection.
I think he actually said Covenant rather than Prometheus.
Did he say Covenant?
He said Covenant.
And then it turns into Resurrection. And that last bit was the bit that worried me the most going in.
Yeah, there's that too. I mean, Nash on Blue Sky, who's one of the Channel Awesome people, or former Channel Awesome people, because he's off doing his own thing now. I follow him on Blue Sky, and he made a good point of, basically, every time they try to do a new version of the alien, it doesn't work. It's like, there are apparently two people in the world who are qualified to design aliens. One is H.I. Giger, and the other is Stan Winston, and they are both dead.
So that gives you the drone and the queen, basically.
Yeah, and no one else has ever successfully done a riff on the design. I know people like the Pred Alien. I think it's really bad. Some people like that, but that's not
Does
me.
anybody actually like Newborn, though?
No one likes Newborn.
Yeah.
And the thing at the end of this, we won't say too much because, you know, you might be interested. It's one of the ones where I can see what you're going for. I think it's a bad idea. I think it's a bad design. I can see how you got there, though. Why it looks like that is understandable given how it got there. The process.
But based on my friend's review, I'd say the first hour of the movie is very strong.
Yeah. Again, it is the sequel to Alien you would have expected in the 80s. It is actually a very weird retro thing. And if they just resisted the Prometheus thing. Because I was actually thinking this morning how you'd rewrite it to remove the Prometheus stuff, and it's not that hard.
No, you don't need it in any way.
I think the only problem is you need what that last act, what the creature is going to be, the last form.
You could have brought a queen.
You could have brought a queen in, but you didn't. I'm guessing they sort of said, we know what that looks like. We're also, given Ridley Scott's presence, it's entirely possible he's going to keep, while they're very much admitting that aliens exists, they're pushing towards the alien side of things, so you don't need a queen.
Yeah.
Is I think possibly what Ridley Scott's going for, and that's why the queen's out. I think the problem is the environment looks great. All the clunky tech and everything looks absolutely fantastic. It looks like the Nostromo again.
There were
successfully captured
some
that.
elements of the CGI though that cracked me up. I couldn't. You heard me giggling in the cinema in that scene where just a herd of facehuggers kind of skit around a corner.
Yeah,
it never looks quite right to me. I think they're too adorable when you see them in motion and not just spring-loaded.
Yeah, it's a bit odd seeing them actually as animated things. I mean, like, you had the one shot of them in Aliens, and that's like one very brief sequence. This was a lot of extended facehugger stuff. As much as I think the alien looks fine for the most part, and you very rarely get a clear shot of it, which is at least, that's the right idea. On the other hand, the few times you see it moving, it doesn't have anything like the motion of the first 3 films. It's not got the weird posing of Alien. It's not kind of got the very brief glimpses in Aliens, and it's not got the kind of the way they puppet it in Alien 3 is actually really good for kind of monstrous movement.
The dog alien.
The dog alien. The way they move that is actually really good.
I would love to talk in detail about the Alien franchise, because as I've mentioned to you in the past, I consider it a franchise with 2 good films.
Yes, and
it's interesting that they keep churning out more and more films of this franchise. I know my opinion is polarizing, but in my sense, 2 good films.
The sort of thing is, it is a better sequel to Alien than we've had for a long time. Prometheus casts this enormous long shadow, and it falls onto the film, and it really shouldn't do. Let's talk about Metal Man.
A Metal Man? But Nick, that's only in the movies.
It is. We did extra research for this one, which is a unusual thing for us, but it was illuminating, wasn't it? But we'll get to that
It's
in a minute.
It's a word I'd use to describe it, yeah.
First episode today is Salvage, directed by Rob Hardy, written by Jeffrey Bell, and first broadcast on the 14th of January 2001. So guest stars, Tamara Clatterbuck played Lorena Jackson. The only thing we've seen her in is, of all things, UHF.
That's weird.
Yeah, she was on, he's got his talk show sequence.
Yeah.
She was the dominatrix in that.
Oh, fair enough.
Ira Gross played Dr. Pagovi, who was in Minority Report, another one, getting all the cross-sections, Atlas Shrugged Part 2.
I'm sorry, which Minority... Oh, no, there's only one.
There's only one
Minority. I was thinking Total Recall.
Minority Report. He's going to show up in Millennium. He's in Glow, the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, the Netflix series.
Oh, yes.
And Better Call Saul.
Ah, who's he in Saul?
He's a judge. I can't remember which judge. He's a
fair
judge
enough.
in one
There
of
is
the
a few.
Yeah. Scott McDonald played Curtis Delario. Now, curiously, he's in Fire in the Sky, which also starred Robert Patrick. He was also in Jack Frost and Jack Frost 2.
Which Jack Frost?
These are the horror ones.
The horror ones, okay.
Ones. Not the Michael Keaton frosty...
Heartwarming ones.
Yeah, not that one. The bad, low-budget horror ones.
Great low-budget horror movie.
Fair enough. Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, Next Generation, Voyager, Enterprise, and Star Trek Klingon, the video game.
Okay.
Frasier. And additional voices in Dead Space and Final Fantasy XIII.
Okay.
And Wade Williams, the star of this one, is Raymond Aloysius Pierce, who's in Candyman Day of the Dead.
Okay.
The Hole, the Joe Dante one, not the English one.
The Joe Dante one's the kind of utterly terrifying kid-friendly horror one.
That one, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. The Dark Knight Rises. That guy who was in that thing appropriately. We've referenced this a few before for someone.
That guy that was in that thing?
It's a documentary about, you spot someone in a film.
Oh, that one, yeah.
Yeah, he was in that. He's in the first Venom.
Okay.
He's also in Star Trek Voyager and Enterprise. In all the Star Trek casts in there. Avatar The Last Airbender as a warden. And Legend of Korra. And then he made a really big mistake. Cowboy Bebop.
Live action?
The live action.
Oh no.
Oh no.
So, would you like to give us a synopsis of Salvage?
I would, from Wikipedia. In Muncie, Indiana, Nora Pierce and Curtis Delario argue about the death of her husband, Ray. Nora believes that Ray died from Gulf War syndrome. After attempting to comfort her, Delario starts to drive home and crashes into a man in the middle of the road. His car is totaled, but the man is unharmed as the car breaks around his body. Curtis, grievously injured, looks at the man and says, "Ray." The man's arm slams through the windshield as Curtis screams. Scully and Doggett investigate the crash. Scully points out a man stopped the car, but Doggett points out it would have required a dense block of steel to stop the car. Nora Pierce asks what happened to Curtis Delario. Soon afterwards, Scully finds his body in a garbage can nearby. His face has gaping holes in it. Autopsying the remains, Scully concludes that the 5 holes in the man's face were made by human fingers, and someone reached into Delario's wrecked vehicle and pulled him out by his face. Doggett finds a fresh fingerprint and Ray Pierce's blood. Doggett pays a visit to Nora Pierce and finds her in the company of Harry Odell, who employed Ray Pierce at his salvage yard. Doggett relates the evidence found at the crime scene that appears to indicate Ray is actually alive, but Nora insists she saw Ray die, and neither she nor Odell believe Ray could have been involved in Curtis's death. Later, Ray Pierce eats at a halfway house as a volunteer, Lorena Jackson, tries to engage with him. Ray ignores her efforts to reach out and completely uninterested in conversation. Meanwhile, at the salvage yard, Odell is shredding documents when Ray appears. Harry feigns friendliness while surreptitiously pulling a shotgun from his desk. He blasts Ray through a sliding glass door, telling him, "This time you stay dead." Outside, he finds Ray's detached arm rebuilding itself, seemingly with metal. Harry is transfixed by the sight as Ray kills him. The next morning, Doggett checks out the new murder scene and finds an interesting shredded document with a company name for Chamber Technologies. Doggett goes to the offices and meets Dr. Pavlovi, who tells him about the company's effort to build smart metals, metal alloys designed to rebuild themselves, but are still a metallurgist's pipe dream. Doggett asks about the employee number on the shredded document and learns that the employee, Dr. Clifton, is no longer with the company. On the phone with Scully, Doggett mentions smart metals, and Scully tells him that Ray Pierce's medical record shows that he did not have Gulf War syndrome, but instead that his whole cellular structure was changing due to exposure to an unknown substance. Meanwhile, Lorena sees Ray's obituary in the paper and a television news story about the murder at the salvage yard and decides to call Ray's widow. Scully discusses Ray Pierce with Doggett, wondering how, if Pierce has become a metal man, can he be stopped. Pierce later arrives at Chamber Technologies and Dr. Pagovi lures him into a containment chamber. Doggett, Scully and SWAT team members surround the chamber, but Ray tears his way out of a brick wall. Nora waits for Ray in the halfway house, and Ray explains that he didn't come home because he isn't himself anymore. When Nora pleads to help Ray, he angrily turns to her and says they've got to pay for this, they've all got to pay. Doggett, searching the salvage yard, finds a Chamber Technologies drum, inside of which is a metal corpse. When Scully and Doggett confront Pagovio about it, he admits it was Dr. Clifton, the doctor who allegedly disappeared. In truth, Clifton was poisoned by his own work with alloys and requested to be put into the barrel in order to not ruin the company or slow the research. Though the barrel was meant to be transferred someplace safe, it was instead sent to a salvage yard. Doggett and Scully conclude that Ray was exposed to the barrel, thus transformed into a metal human. At the same time, Doggett notices Nora Pierce at the lab, looking through files for the person responsible, and in talking to her, makes her understand that an unfortunate series of accidents led to Ray's poisoning, and that no one was truly to blame for his death. Later, the halfway house is raided by the FBI to find Pierce. Lorena finds Ray and he puts a hand over her mouth to muffle her, but he kills her by accident. After Doggett and Scully interrogate Nora, she arrives home and Ray shows up demanding the name of the person responsible. She tells them that the man responsible is Owen Harris. Conflicted by the violence Ray has been inflicted on a largely innocent people, Nora tells the police Ray is looking for Owen Harris. Ray finds Harris along with his family and nearly kills him. However, he realizes that Harris was an accountant who accidentally sent the barrel to the salvage yard, and seeing that he ultimately innocent, Ray spares him and goes off to die. Scully believes that this act represents the last of Ray's humanity, and that whatever drove him to kill also made him spare a man who begged for his life. At the very end of the episode, a car is dropped into a compactor at a salvage yard and crushed. As the camera fades out, Ray's eye is seen a still living metal man as the car is crushed.
Thank you.
There's an elephant in the room, or should we say a metal structure made of commingled elements. An unexpectedly homoerotic film, we must say.
Yeah, a kind of relatively unheard of film in the West, but a very cult one, in fact.
Yeah, so we are talking about Tetsuo the Iron Man, which is... Well, I think the writer, Jeffrey Bell, admitted that basically Salvage is a version of Tetsuo.
Yes, it is.
And so we watched Tetsuo after watching Salvage, and it's like... What was most interesting about Tetsuo was how many things have inspired it and how it inspired a whole lot of other things. Because things like Akira definitely fed into some of the presentation of Tetsuo, without any doubt. There's definitely a lot of Alien and Aliens fed into it as well, with some of the design work.
Mm.
So that was interesting, and it inspired Salvage, obviously, and it probably... What else? We saw there's some other things it was obviously inspired, wasn't there? Silent Hill, actually, I think was one of them. There's some shots which are basically Silent Hill.
There are some shots that are definitely... When I streamed Silent Hill 2 a month or so ago, there are some shots that have obviously been lifted from Tetsuo in there.
Yeah, so it's a bizarre underground influential thing that it's weird cross-section of different franchises.
I feel I should probably warn here, if you're going to go and seek out Tetsuo, though, it is a surrealist film. It's very much in the style of David Lynch's Eraserhead. It's very violent, and there is a lot of erotica. It's almost pornographic in places. Definitely a body horror.
Yeah, this is...
I think the creator cited the fact that Videodrome was a big influence on it.
You can see Videodrome's influence all over it. And ultimately, the least terrible interpretation of the film is it's a discovery of your own sexuality and discovering that you are gay, I think.
Yeah.
Is the best way to read the film in the end.
There's certainly a reading you can do about the protagonist being gay in the end of it.
And, discovering himself, because his relationship with his girlfriend... None of these people have names, incidentally, in this film. They are
the main character is just Salaryman.
Yeah, and I think she's just woman or something, and there's lady in the train station. But it's discovering his kind of unsatisfactory, awkward life with this girl, and then he gets into a fight with the other metal man, and they merge together. There's a lot of phallic imagery in this film as well. Geeka would be proud.
With a fairly dark ending, with them inferring the fact that they're going to go and create a new world of metal by infecting the world.
Yeah. It's hard to come out of it with a metaphor that isn't a little bit squeaky, just in terms of forcing your worldview on other people, but there are some other interpretations which have come a lot darker and we don't really want to get into.
Yeah.
So we skip over those.
But you can particularly see, it's even down to the fact that the opening sting of this episode is somebody ramming a car into a metal man, which is basically how Tetsuo begins.
Yeah. Although it must be said, in the comparison of Salvage is a lot clearer cut with what's going on, whereas Tetsuo is who, what? Where are we?
Yeah.
And oh my god, is that that is, yes. That is now what he's endowed with. Unexpected, very unexpected. Salvage stripped a lot of it away.
Yeah, Salvage doesn't have pneumatic penises.
No. At the same time, though, I think Tetsuo's surreal nature helps in a way that Salvage's more grounded way doesn't. Because I think you asked very early on in Salvage is when Ray is hit by the car in the opening. Fair enough, Doggett makes the whole physics thing about the block of steel and everything.
Yeah.
He's not that dimension. He's also in a human form. He's still got some amount of blood and skin and things, and he's not a bloody smear against a metal endoskeleton or something.
I'd say at the very least, we see later in the episode, his human skin peeling to reveal mechanical nature underneath. When a car slams you at that speed, it would just slough all his skin off.
Yeah. It's I think it's the restrictions of the TV, what you can get away with on TV, really. At the same time, I think we came away from Salvage saying, yeah, making an X-Files version of Tetsuo wasn't a good idea. That Tetsuo is like 20 minutes longer than this episode.
It's not a long film.
It's 67 minutes. It's like literally about 20 minutes longer than this episode. And neither of them are great narratives. Tetsuo is at least doing its own thing. Salvage is kind of hampered because it's got to do all of this at the same time and then do the normal X-Files thing on top of it.
Yeah.
And that's a weird thing to try and get across.
It was one of the big criticisms of this when it came out, is the fact that Doggett and Scully's investigation and the revenge story featuring Ray don't really connect that much.
No, and I think, and it's something that's going to come up in Badla when we get to it in a minute, of this script feels like it was cut down. Both of them feel like they were cut down, but Badla feels worse. But this one, it's when they lure Ray at Chamber Technologies. There's no setup from Doggett and Scully's side.
Yeah.
There's not even a whole he might come here kind of feel to it. It's like Doggett looks at the invoice, and then we cut to Ray breaking in, and they just happen to all be waiting over the SWAT team, and it just feels incomplete.
Yeah, it's a strangely structured episode, and again, that's something that it was kind of criticised. This episode got almost universally negative reviews on release, which I do feel is a tad unfair because I'd say it's average at best.
Yeah, it's another middle of the road one. It's not a great X-Files episode, but I think the problem is that the concept seems neat and kind of X-Files-y if you don't know Tetsuo exists. Once you know Tetsuo exists, you go, why have you bothered to do this?
So the first criticism I read of it was that the episode itself seems mechanical. It's not exciting, it's not tense, it's drawing you in. It's just by the numbers, chunk, 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 chunk. This is how an X-Files episode runs. Which is kind of interesting to argue that a story about a man turning into a machine is mechanical.
I was going to say, that feels like that could be deliberate. And that's possibly... This is one of the things where, if David Lynch was doing this, you'd probably have an easier time getting people to accept that that was all intentional. I think with these people, you're going to go, was it intentional, or was this a happy accident that also makes people bored?
The other major criticism, which I think is an interesting one to explore, is the fact that it doesn't do enough to make you sympathise with Ray.
No, it tries. It has some sad music when he's nail-clipping metal filings out of his face.
And also, you know, what's happened to him is inherently sad because it's not his fault in any way. It's an accident.
No, but it's like, rereading the synopsis, I thought one of the things I feel the episode never tangles with is Nora watches Ray die. And there's no sense of how that was able to happen, and then him resurrect as a Metal Man. Because the episode reads more like he vanished and they've assumed he's dead.
Yeah.
But they said they cremated him. It's like, you're going to have to... What happened there then? Whose ashes... Because we never get an answer to that. It's, whose ashes was she given?
Yeah.
Because she got some ashes back. What was she given? Because I don't think if you just burn a coffin, that's not a huge amount of the ash you get back, is it? I know it's going to be some consistent part of it. There's going to be other stuff that was burned at the same time.
Yes.
But it's a really odd thing for her to say, I've got his ashes.
Whose ashes are those?
Yeah, what were you given? Who was this?
There's also an element, it portrays it a lot like what's happened is an accident, but there is an evidence of cover-up there in the sense of what happened to the previous scientist, which they were all aware of.
Yeah, and I think they don't critique the new doctor says he insisted we stick him in a barrel and sort of don't tell anyone because it wouldn't stop the research.
Yeah.
Mulder would have sort of pushed back and said, did he really? Because all we've got is your say-so, and he's trying to force himself out of a barrel based on the physical evidence.
But, you know, you have all these stories in the media about companies clandestine hiding waste and stuff like that. You wouldn't just dump it in a salvage yard. No,
and I'm kind of in two minds about that, because I like the idea is the bean counter said, we'll do this because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And I can completely say that works. At the same time, this is really dangerous stuff that people don't actually admit exists.
You think you would have dumped it in a landfill miles away from anything where no one would find out about it?
Yeah, and they don't make it clear how that either cheapness or that kind of mix-up occurred. It just did.
Now, there is a very famous true-life case that happened in one of the Russian states of a salvager finding what he thought was an abandoned building full of rare metal to salvage, and it turned out to be a place where they were dumping nuclear waste, and of course he eventually died due to exposure to it.
Yeah.
You need that sort of element to it, where Ray has stumbled across this very hidden, kind of unmarked, undesignated remote place and picked this stuff up because it's not what he thought it was.
Yeah.
Then you'd have more of a sense of accident and more of a sense of the company being kind of underhanded.
Yes. Well, I mean, we could go back to Tetsuo again there, in that the infection is a hit-and-run incident. And they drag his body off. It's revealed really out of order, and it's very confused how they do it anyway, deliberately. Is they then tried to cover it up by burying the body in the woods.
Yeah.
And that feels a far better way of Ray becoming infected. Because the implication from Salvage is he handled these barrels or something and they leaked, possibly, and he was infected by the alloy.
Yeah.
But then Doggett pokes around at the barrels and kicks it over and everything and doesn't care that he's just sloshed this liquid metal stuff into the groundwater.
That's a recurring theme on the X-Files, though, because look at our lack of pandemic prevention in the likes of Emasculata.
Oh, yeah. But it's still, the episode doesn't, there's no implied risk to Doggett at all.
No.
I mean, you wouldn't do it to Doggett because then you're going to really hammer home the Terminator 2 references that you've already got.
That was actually a happy accident, you know. At the time this episode was written and greenlit, they didn't know who they were casting as Doggett. So it's just a sheer accident that you got the T-1000 in there.
It's a nice touch.
It's great for that line where he comments on the fact that metal men are only in the movies.
I would have been more impressed, though, if they'd got like some of the Tetsuo cast cameo in this. I mean, I mean, I probably would have been too expensive for them because they're almost certainly still in Japan, but that would have been hilarious.
Even if it's not the cast, you could have had like a Japanese scientist with the name of one of the actors or something.
It does feel like that's an oversight. Is if you're going to go this far into we are making a version of Tetsuo, that you've missed out on some of the other stuff you could put in there. I mean, it's hard that Tetsuo was just, frankly, it's basically a music video anyway.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's barely a film, but it was very illustrative. But yeah, people accept a lot of explanations at face value in this episode, and it feels frustrating. And it's also, some of it just feels like strained for time. Like when Ray kills the woman at the halfway house, he puts his hand over her mouth and she dies.
I presume he suffocated her or something.
Yeah, but that's not really well done either. I think the other thing is he's not implied to be infectious.
No.
Which you'd think, given that he managed to contract this from, we don't know quite what he was doing even still.
No.
They don't make that clear.
He works in a salvage yard. It could just purely be that he was handling and moving this waste.
Yeah, but he was doing it on his own. And those battles aren't light, so quite how he managed to only himself get gone.
And not the other two guys that work there.
Yeah, it's sort of, the episode falls apart when you start picking at it. It's, unfortunately we come back to the top of, Tetsuo barely had a handle on how to do this plot line, and you've failed to replicate it.
I think my problem with making Ray sympathetic is that we needed to see Ray before he was infected.
Yeah.
If you'd had the idea that Ray is becoming more of a machine, less human, less emotional, you'd have that whole thing that seems to have struck his wife when she realises at the end that this isn't her husband has died.
Yeah.
But we never saw the Ray before. We've just seen vengeful Ray, who seems to be taking out his rage on his very unfortunate and horrible situation on people who have nothing to do with it, like the other employees at the salvage plant.
Yeah, it was his directed rage was weird and confusing. I mean, we're going to get this with Badla as well. Badla is even worse for this.
But in this one, he kills the two guys that work with him at the salvage plant. He has a shot at the main scientist, which is the one that makes sense but doesn't manage to get him.
Yep.
And then he goes for a random accountant.
Yeah, the guy who authorised the dumping at the salvage yard.
It's a really, really weird direction to take this.
Well, the other thing you just made me realise is, if we have that Ray losing his humanity and becoming more machine-like, the need for vengeance is human. As he becomes more machine-like, that aspect of him should drop away.
Think of it like your prime directive, though.
Well,
it's the one thing that is powering you on is, I must kill these people.
Yeah, but it's things like, he should lose some of the subterfuge, because basically you can't do anything to him after a while.
No.
So he should be just like...
marching along in pure daylight.
He should be like the Juggernaut in Marvel.
The Juggernaut's not a robot.
But that kind of attitude, though, if you can't do anything to it, he's going to just keep on moving forward, he's going to do what he wants to do.
The unstoppable force.
Yeah, you have to get out of the way, or you have a supernatural immovable object to counter him.
Mm.
But think the Juggernaut, especially in Deadpool 2.
Yeah.
That would be what Ray is turning into, isn't it?
Or the Terminator.
Although the Terminator is actually more of a subterfuge stealth infiltration thing. Arnold
Schwarzenegger is not.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's casting irrespective. The other Terminator you see in the first one, though, one that does sneak into the base.
Yeah.
That's not how Ray handled. Ray is more like Arnold as the Terminator.
Yeah.
But even he has a level of stealth. Little bit. Only occasionally drives trucks into police stations.
True.
It's a weird episode to talk about again.
I think the only thing we've really missed is talking about Scully and Doggett's relationship in this case.
Yeah, and I feel kind of weird about a few things, because Scully doesn't get to do a whole load in this episode.
No.
Again. And it's weird that she gets to find the body by looking in a random wheelie bin across the street.
And well, bodies don't smell bad, and flies don't gather around them, and that sort of thing.
And there's no blood trail leading to it, because it hasn't been raining or anything, and that body would have been bleeding. You think there'd at least be
little spots of blood where he's dragged this guy across the street?
Yeah.
By his head, grabbing him like a bowling ball.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we possibly talk about the grisliness, because this is a deeply unpleasant episode.
A lot of them are in this season, though. It is a more violent series.
But again, it's interesting that there's deeply unpleasant versus Tetsuo, which has weird body horror stuff, but nothing as visceral as Salvage does.
No. I still think his level of strength doesn't make entirely sense in Salvage, because being unnaturally hard doesn't make you unnaturally strong.
No, well, this is a criticism I made about some of the Wolverine things. Because, like, Wolverine Origins has that one brief moment where he's really heavy and he stands on something or sits on something and it collapses under him because he's that heavy.
Which it should, because his skeleton is made of adamantium.
Yeah, but his musculature hasn't been enhanced to deal with this or something. And in this as well, it's like Ray is turning into a Meta Man. Okay, but his muscles presumably are still muscles or they're becoming mechanical or something, but the tensile strength doesn't make sense.
Or from the other scale is, he is literally turning to metal in the same way someone would petrify, which means that movement would get more difficult.
Yeah.
Because, his joints wouldn't work anymore and things like that.
Well, that's what I thought the ending was trying to allude to. But that doesn't come across either.
But it's also what the guy in the barrel looks like something that's been petrified or fossilized.
Yeah, and so it's how he's depicted in the episode and how he interacts with things doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, even if you buy into the sci-fi concept, you're going, but wait, no.
It's one of those things like invisibility, which is a neat kind of core horror concept, but doesn't work if you try to apply real-world science to it.
No, but if you get into magical thinking, invisibility is fine. I think in this one, there are so many caveats and sort of explanations you need for Ray's situation. You start to go, no, wait.
You're thinking about it in terms as well of, in places where this done well, the shonen anime series My Hero Academia has the character who can harden his entire body.
Yeah.
But it doesn't give him super strength, it just makes his skin invulnerable.
Yeah, and that's also part of the superhero. We have to have some kind of balance because no one could be too powerful or too weak.
But that's kind of how you work this around. It's like an either-or thing. It's one does not necessarily follow the other.
Yeah, and you've reminded me that we sort of basically noticed that a character in My Hero Academia has taken some powers from Tetsuo. It's
quite a lot, really.
Yeah, it's probably the whole... How much of was this actually an influence? I'm tempted to look up if you're going to admit to have watched Tetsuo before.
It's Ida, isn't it, with his kind of engine quirk.
Yeah, you look at it and go, wait a minute. The other thing, though, I think we'd talk about Doggett in this episode. I think one of the critical problems is he stops far shorter than she would.
I think Scully always had this kind of Sherlock Holmes ideal of she will accept the supernatural if there is no other explanation. Doggett can't go that extra step.
Yeah, but it's also, when they find the crashed car, he says, idiot, take a block of steel, XYZ.
Which he's correct.
He is correct. He doesn't ever try to justify where this block of steel is.
I think it's his degree of Occam's razor is, even though I can't prove it, the facts are these, it has to be this.
Yeah. But it's the problem of what he's seeing cannot possibly equate to this, because that block of steel left no marks on the road, whereas you've got the imprints of two shoes. Where's the block of steel gone, John?
I think Doggett just kind of exemplifies that kind of philosophical thought, though, where even though I can't explain this, it's physically impossible, so there must be an explanation somewhere that I'm not seeing.
Yeah.
Whereas Scully's logic works the other way of, this is impossible, but there is no explanation for it, I must accept the supernatural.
Yeah. And I think the problem with Doggett's one as well, though, is while that's kind of a laudable mindset, especially when dealing with the X-Files, although that's more of a kind of a stumbling block for the X-Files, is, yeah, you have to tell us where the steel block is, how the steel block was secured to the ground without any other markings.
And where it's gone.
Where it's gone, and how the guy driving the car didn't notice it before he hit it. These are all important questions, John. And you've just sort of said, oh, that's fine. Do you have anything about Salvage, or should we get into some deeply troubling, for multiple reasons, Shaban stuff? I know you don't want to.
Let's talk Badla.
I've got a small humorous bit before we get to Badla, at least.
Go on.
Badla, directed by Tony Wamby and written by John Shaban. Shaban! First broadcast on 25th of January 2001. Okay, so there are only two people who've known this. First is, of course, Deep Roy, who played Beggar Man.
That's what he's
called.
Not Fekir.
Not Fekir, just Beggar Man. I know. So one of Deep Roy's interesting things is he largely did a whole load of stunt work before he ever got to do any kind of on-screen acting. He's been in a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. So Pink Panther Strikes Again was his first film credit. He was in the Muppet Movie, Flash Gordon, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, because he did Yoda and R2-D2 stand-ins.
Okay.
He was in The Dark Crystal. This is Spinal Tap.
Oh.
I think he must have been in Stonehenge.
Yeah.
Never-ending story. Buckaroo Banzai across the 8th dimension. It keeps coming back. Return to Oz. Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Poltergeist 2. Hook. Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Matilda. Basketball. Van Helsing. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That's one everyone knows because he was all the Oompa Loompas in the Tim Burton version.
Yeah.
Corpse Bride, where he actually got to voice someone.
Okay.
Star Trek Into Darkness and Star Trek Beyond, where he was Scotty's little assistant.
Of course, yeah.
Doctor Who. The old Doctor Who's in the 70s version of Doctor Who.
Okay.
And Blake Seven.
Oh.
But anyway, so the one I kind of went there, oh my god, what? Is Michael Welsh played Trevor.
Who's the blonde kid, the bully?
The blonde kid, the bully. You know, so he was in Star Trek Insurrection and Frasier. And in a different fantasy series of some small fame.
Go on.
He is Mike in Twilight.
Oh, of course he is. Yeah, I can totally see it.
And thus he's in all the other ones too.
Yeah.
What the hell?
I can totally see that's him.
Yeah, but I didn't think of him in years at first.
Oh, bless.
Yeah.
He was also apparently in Neighbours. That was one of his big
things. Oh, is he? Okay.
Indeed, on the day this aired, the show that showed directly before it on American syndicated TV was Neighbours, which also featured him.
Oh my. What's Neighbours doing on this late at night, really?
Pass.
We had it on like 5:30.
Yeah.
So, would you, unfortunately, like to tell us about Indian fakirs and I don't know what happens in this episode?
No, I really don't want to.
No, I know. Unfortunately.
Okay, our episode opens at Sahar International Airport in Mumbai, where we see a heavily overweight American businessman making his way through customs and en route being very dismissive to a paraplegic beggar on a little trolley who is begging for him. He uses the airport's bathroom, and while doing so, he sees the beggar he passed earlier's cart pull up under his door, before he's grabbed by the ankles and violently pulled out of the store. Later, on arriving back in America, he checks into a hotel in Washington, D.C., though, interestingly, does not seem to speak to anyone on his way in. When alone in the room, he sits down on the bed, and immediately blood starts to stream out of every hole in his body. Later that day, Scully and Doggett arrive at the scene to investigate, because it's been brought to their desk as a case where a man's blood has abruptly all drained out of his body, despite there being no signs of Ebola or any other hemorrhagic fever. Doggett also notices what appears to be a child's bloody handprint on the quilt cover next to him. However, Scully is reluctant to believe that a child could have been responsible for the amount of damage they are seeing. Later, we see the beggar, now somehow disguised as a completely ordinary-looking white man, applying for a janitorial job at a Maryland elementary school, despite still apparently being unable to speak. Scully autopsies the businessman's corpse to discover that there is massive internal damage to his rectum, intestinal wall, and stomach, which leads Doggett to the idea that he might have been a drug mule and that somehow the drugs have been forcibly cut out of him, despite the fact there were no signs of drugs in his blood test and no real external trauma that would indicate this. Scully also tells Doggett that the time of death was around 24 to 36 hours prior, which means that he must have died in India. There was also a strange discrepancy in his weight on his passport, which means that Scully starts to become suspicious that maybe there was something kind of hitching a ride inside his corpse, wearing him essentially as a human skin suit. Later that night, we see Quinton, a young 6th grader at the elementary school, who sees a strange legless beggar man in his room at night and calls his father up. Of course, by the time he gets there, his father sees nothing and tells him he must have dreamt it. As the father goes back downstairs, Quinton hears his dad scream. He rushes down and finds his dad dead, his eyes filled with blood. As there are some similarities with the businessman's murder, Doggett and Scully investigate, and they hear about the strange man that the boy saw in his room. Doggett investigates the room and does find evidence of this. There are handprints on both the inside and the outside of the window, and the boy's testimony did mention the fact that his dad closed the window, showing how the beggar could have entered. Scully is kind of surprised when examining the body that there is a surprising lack of damage to it despite the burst blood vessels in his eyes. She still, however, is convinced that there may be a connection and wonders if what we are seeing is the earlier stages of what happened to the businessman. She runs to the morgue and finds that the boy's father has a horrendously distended belly, looking almost like he's pregnant. She cuts into him and sees a hand slowly emerge from the incision she makes. However, she's then knocked over and misses seeing whatever escapes the body. Although she follows a bloody trail to a storage closet, she finds no one hiding inside. However, we as the audience see that the beggar has somehow turned invisible and is crouched at the bottom of the closet looking at her. Back at the school, we see Trevor, a bully who torments Quentin, examining the janitor. He's realised there's something sus about him and sees a flicker in the skies, seeing the true beggar underneath. Trevor later goes to Quentin's home to apologise and explains to Quentin that he thinks he's seen who the murderer is. Meanwhile, Scully and Doggett call in Chuck Burks, Mulder's old friend who has consulted with him in many cases. He tells them about Fakir, who are Indian ascetic masters who kind of torture themselves in a way to attain enlightenment, and notoriously a sect of them called the City Mystics can do magical things because they've attained this enlightenment of the mind, so they can alter perception and the ways that they are perceived by others. Doggett, of course, is sceptical about Chuck's beliefs, something that Chuck is quite understanding about, remarking to Scully that it's hard to believe in something you can't understand. Scully looks into further why a city mystic would be kind of taking out such violent acts against Americans. She discovers a case involving a chemical plant just outside of Mumbai that was not widely reported in the US. This American plant accidentally released a cloud of cyanide gas which killed 118 people, one of whom was the 11-year-old son of a holy man of the beggar caste, who we have to believe is the son of the man responsible for these killings. On the way home from school, Trevor hears a weird squeaking sound, which of course we know is the sounds of the Fakir's dolly. He rushes home, kind of running past his mother because he's fearful he's being pursued. Trevor's mother tries to follow him and finds her son drowning in the swimming pool outside. She dives in to try and save him, but the Trevor in the pool morphs into the beggar and kills her. Later that night, when Scully and Doggett are investigating the scene, Doggett's sceptical that it has anything to do with anything. Trevor returns home and panically tells Scully that the little man followed him and was responsible. On Trevor's tip, Doggett and the police arrest the janitor at the school. Scully also calls Chuck, who turns up with his video camera hoping to catch footage of a fakir. To Doggett's utter surprise and confusion, when they set up the camera, it shows that there is no one sitting in the chair, even though they can physically see the janitor in the room. Doggett calls Scully, who is worried about the fact that the fakir has vanished. She's gone to Trevor's house to speak with him, only to discover that Trevor has also snuck out. Meanwhile, back at the school, Quentin and Trevor work together to hunt the fakir. On seeing the janitor on the premises when they thought he was arrested, the principal also calls Scully to make her aware of this. The fakir turns the hunt around and begins stalking the boys, eventually trapping Quentin in a room, and just as Scully arrives, taking Trevor's form, so they are unaware it's him. Scully is at first reluctant to shoot what she believes to be Trevor. However, she believes what the boy tells her, realising that's what Mulder would have done, and shoots him dead. Following the shooting, Scully breaks down as she realises that she was just not capable of viewing this case without prejudice or judgment. She wishes she has an open mind like Mulder will have done. In the ending sting, set 2 weeks later, back at Sahar International Airport, we see an unharmed fakir watching another heavy-set American businessman pass by.
Thank you.
No, don't thank me.
Okay, well, thank you. There's a bit of Taliko in here.
I think the elephant in the room here is the fact that we haven't seen X-Files make this faux pas in a while, but it's another really xenophobic X-Files episode.
Yeah, I mean, the Taliko thing is kind of more surface level thing, but it's hard not to put it in the list of hopefully well-meaning, but ultimately really iffy X-Files episodes.
I actually did some research into fakirs and Siddhi mysticism, and it's portrayed in a very, very skin surface way in this episode.
I'm not totally surprised.
So the fakir is indeed the kind of Hindu and, in some areas, Muslim word for holy man. And the idea of being a fakir is like kind of being any sort of extreme religious person. You often see it a lot in Buddhism as well. These are the people who kind of distance themselves from society and take a kind of life as a beggar, essentially. They don't even take vows of poverty at fakirs, but usually that's what's expected of them. They distance themselves from life because they believe that enlightenment comes from within, not from without. They are very, very revered, however, and often do live quite good lives because people leave offerings to them because it's seen as a great religious holy thing to become a fakir and dedicate your life to this.
Yeah.
A siddhi is something entirely different. Essentially, the concept of siddhi is more attributed to being a yogi, which is something separate to being a fakir, although the two can overlap. So the idea of siddhi mysticism is if you meditate powerfully, you eventually get to this point where you kind of become so self-aware that your abilities expand the reach of your body. So there are 8 possible powers you can gain through doing this. And some of them are the things that are attributed to this man. So there's one that allows you to shrink down to the size of an atom. There's one that allows you to levitate. There's one that allows you to kind of transport yourself to anywhere in the world. But again, siddhi mysticism is not a thing. Siddhi is the name of this power.
Okay.
Which is not the same thing as being a fakir, which is being a holy man. But fakirs are the ones that you might have seen largely seen in a kind of negative light. They're the kind of people who lie on bed of nails and handle poisonous snakes and stuff like that. Because again, it's the idea that the fact that you've distanced yourself from your body and sensations of pain and things, which enables you to do these feats, and being able to practice these feats allows you to attain enlightenment.
Yeah, so as far as I understand it, bed of nails don't hurt to lie on anyway because your surface area is spread across the points.
But again, you don't know if it's entirely accurate, but there are cases where people have reported that mystics have laid on a bed of nails for like 20 years without moving and things like that.
A little bit less plausible.
And the ones who literally live in rooms full of poisonous cobras and things like that.
Yeah. So, well, thank you. It's an interesting, the actual real-world version of this.
It was very interesting to research, actually. You don't know how much of this is because, to our Western perspective, this seems a bit strange, and how much of it is entirely accurate with our cultural bias. But it was an interesting thing to have a little read about.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have to deal with Badla.
Yeah.
One of the real problems rewatching the episode, because I think we haven't watched this episode for years because we had our cut down list of episodes we actually liked. And this, unsurprisingly, was not on it. Yeah. And I don't think the last time we watched it, we weren't paying attention to it either. Because why would you want to pay attention to this one? But rewatching it for this, one of the most fundamental big problems with the episode is that the beggar has a motivation if Scully's correct. But even if that is his motivation, what it engenders him to do doesn't make any sense.
You mean the focus of his vengeance? The word Badla means vengeance as well.
So it's if Scully is correct, this is the father of a child who was killed in that arsenic gas incident.
Cyanide gas, yes.
Cyanide gas. Okay. So you would expect... so in the contrast to Taliko was... The melanin vampire was an opportunist who just took people as he got to them.
And he preyed on people of colour purely because they had the more melanin.
Yeah, and but he was also trying to make his own life in the United States because he was actually going through the immigration process properly and everything. Yeah. So there was some weirdness with what he was doing. He wasn't an out-and-out monster. He was like trying to fit into society kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if we accept the beggar man has lost his child and wants revenge, and the people responsible for this are in America. So I can excuse the businessman at the start of being a means to an end.
Yeah.
He is a morbidly obese person that then he can hitch a ride on. And almost immediately we run into some very weird problems with the episode as it pertains to itself. So the beggar crawls inside this American. The episode does enough to suggest what he's doing. Absolutely grisly and horrible. Never mind. But then apparently uses him as a human mecha in the anime sense.
I prefer the term human skin suit.
Okay, human skin suit. The point is, though, the implication is the beggar is in control of the body. He can't talk because he himself cannot talk.
It's unclear if he can talk at all or if it's just that he doesn't speak English.
Yeah, and he's piloting this body around. I mean, there is a possibility the businessman is going through the motions, but that doesn't quite make sense given he's been dead for 1.5 days.
See, I thought at first he was still alive from those shots of his face when he's bleeding out, but from Scully's prognosis of the fact he's been dead for at least a day, he can't have been.
No, I mean, I wouldn't actually rule out that this episode was rewritten halfway through or something, and this is something that wasn't picked up properly.
Yeah. I was thinking of it in terms of, like, those parasitic wasps of, he's conscious all this time and doesn't die until the thing bursts out of him.
Yeah. But then that would have been okay, but that's not the implication we get.
Yeah.
So I can excuse the businessman being a means to an end, and there's something about the businessman I'm going to get to in a minute, which just... John, what are you doing? So that's, as a way of getting to the States, that's fine. Then he goes to get a job at the school as a janitor, and the plotline just careens off a cliff.
Also note that school's in Maryland, and he touched down in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So why that school?
It's a very good question.
It's not like it was right next door or something like that.
And then you start workshopping it in your head. You go, okay, so maybe Trevor or this other kid are the child of the executive of that chemical plant. So he's going to do to them what they did to him.
Much like the walk.
This is a revenge strategy. The walk is an absolutely excellent example of what this kind of revenge situation would look like. At no point in this episode do we establish that Trevor's father, the other kid's father, his mother, anyone involved has anything to do with this chemical plant. And the beggar man has got a job as a janitor at the school.
But again, even if we say, all right, there's a scene cut somewhere, they are actually the CEOs of this company, why attack the parents before the kids?
Exactly.
The walk has this the right way round of, it's much more torturous for a parent to lose your family.
Yeah.
There is absolutely no point to continue targeting the two kids if you've taken out the parents already.
Yes. And so the motivation is absolutely shot. We don't understand what's going on at all. But then we have to get into the powers that the beggar man has, and we go, John, what are you doing? So he hollowed out this American businessman to hide inside to get over to the States. Grisly, but we can accept that. That's fine.
Chuck actually mentions the fact that they can shrink down to the size to the atom. So he might have made himself very small to pass inside and just for some reason grown big while he was in there. Because that's one of my problems with it, is there is no external sign that this guy is hurt. You think he'd already be bleeding massively.
Yeah. But I mean, we can work with this. That's not, we can bodge that through. The janitor being interviewed just throws everything out the window. Because it's, we have to put aside, we have to put a lot of stuff aside. We have to put aside why he's getting a job as a janitor in a school. Because we just can't even cope with this. But it's when you see the janitor sat there and he's not speaking, he's just nodding, you think, oh, okay, so he's done it again. And you get the whip hands, and he goes back, and he's just the beggar man sitting in the chair. And you have to go, what? Couldn't you have done this to get on the plane?
I think the easier way would have been just kill the businessman and make yourself look like him in that way, because he can evidently project an image and take his seat that way.
And I do get that might have been in a draft at some point, and John Shaban at some point said, no, wait, how do Scully and Doggett get involved? You have to leave a dead body behind. And no one involved in the X-Files said, John, why is there a dead body? Why does it need to leave dead bodies behind? What are you doing? And so we're just baffled. And then we get to, I want to do this all in one thing, but when he kills the other kid's dad, not Trevor's dad, the other kid, Quentin's dad. He kills Quentin's dad for reasons that are beyond my understanding. Because for some reason he's targeting Quentin, then goes and kills his father, and then starts fixating on Trevor for some reason. So he goes downstairs and finds his dad with the bloodshot eyes, which is a creepy visual. And the fact that he did the whole scream and he's just sat there apparently, fine. And then we kind of have that thing that leads into your idea that, he's shrinking down to the size of an atom and then growing up again inside them.
Yeah.
Which has caused them to, distend horribly. Though, again, the businessman didn't seem to have that.
Maybe you wouldn't have told so much in the businessman because he was already overweight.
Maybe.
Quentin's dad's quite slender.
Yeah. So, and we get that grisly bit where he sort of bursts out of him. And then makes himself invisible to avoid Scully.
And phases through a door.
And at some point you've got to start saying, I don't want to call you Beggar Man because that's really terrible. We're going to call you Deep Roy. Oh, we don't really want to call you the Fakir. We'll call you the Fakir. Fakir. What are you doing? With your powers, with your powers of almost unbridled ability, I'm not sure why you're crawling inside these people to do this. But then that leads to the autopsy bit, which gets even weirder. Because they find there's that other American businessman who died like 2 weeks beforehand.
Yeah.
And there's a discrepancy on his passport weight of when he got the passport, he was something or other. And then at point of death, he was 33 pounds heavier. And you want to go, okay, so 33 pounds is the weight of the fakir, which, as you also disputed, that's
2.3 stone.
Yeah, that's too light. He's small, but he's not that small.
Mm.
But surely he wasn't in the body still when you weighed him.
When you were saying this, I was thinking it, but if you're thinking it in terms of Quentin's dad, he was.
Yeah, that one he was.
But they likened this from a distance to the death of the first guy. If it had been early stage like Quentin's dad, they just said he had the bloodshot eyes.
Yeah.
But they mentioned the abdominal trauma.
Yeah.
Which means he's already left.
Yeah. And that's also not true of the businessman at the start of the episode, who also weighs more than he should have done.
Mm.
Or Scully suspects he will weigh more than he should have done.
They don't actually weigh that guy,
They don't, admittedly. They don't know the pre-weight.
But yeah, I think it only works if you've got it in the early stage when the fakir is still inside the guy, which they wouldn't be reporting massive abdominal trauma if he was.
No.
In which case you'd think he'd be lighter because of all the tissue damage and the loss of blood and everything else.
Yeah. It puts me in mind, there was that horror film, was like 21 grams or something. There's meant to be the weight of the soul, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's complete bunk, because people have pointed out there's like loads of other things that happen that will cause that weight discrepancies. Mm. But I think that's what he was trying to get at and missed.
Yeah.
Because you can see the creepiness of, his weight is off by a substantial amount, and that has to be indicative of something. But he's done it in the wrong order somehow, and I don't understand how you make this mistake repeatedly.
Mm.
It's just bananas. And then just the fakir goes on, and why does he kill Trevor's mother? Because it's like, he chases Trevor down the street. Trevor gets home panicked and runs right back out.
Mm.
His mother pursues him, sees apparently him floating in the pool, so she dives in to rescue him. Oh no, it's a fakir. And then he drowns her and runs away. Because he doesn't use her as a mechanism to ferry.
It mentions she has the bloodshot eyes, but no, he doesn't seem to use her as a ferry.
Yeah, and that's the problem, because the bloodshot eyes seem to be a symptom of he's gotten to them. But then Quentin's father also messes that up, because he's got the bloodshot eyes and he's still inside him. Because the way the first kill works is that's him exiting is what does that.
Yeah.
So just the effects aren't even consistent.
No.
And then my favourite really bad writing trick happens. Is Trevor comes back after Doggett and Scully are there and they've fished the body out of the pool and everything. And he comes back looking panicked, and they kind of mention his mother or something, and he's looking shocked and horrified, and it's like, Trevor, you don't know what's happened. You've just walked back into the scene. I know the screenwriter knows that you now know that she's dead, but you don't know this, so your reaction doesn't make any sense. But why let that stop you?
To give the episode one little positive point, I think the opening sting is incredibly strong. Before you know what's going on, it's incredibly creepy.
Yeah, and
it's gory, it's nasty. It's a good horror sting at the start of the episode.
It is, and it also feels like, again, it feels a bit too much like Toliko, but at least it's a start. And also feels like it was written way detached from everything else. Because I also get it, like, it feels a lot like the Beggar Man is just basically wanting revenge for, like, American stinginess.
Yeah, apparently that was one of Shiban's ideas behind this, and it's something that leaves a bad taste in my mouth. He saw someone begging on the street, asking for money, as people do, and he had the idea of, we kind of view these people as being hard up but inherently good people, and it's what if the beggar is actually evil? And it's not a good frame of mind to be in, really. No. These people need our support, our help, our donations. And if you get people into the mindsets of, actually, they might be a psychopath, I'll avoid them.
Yeah, what are you doing,
It's
John?
a bad frame of mind.
That's really bad. The other bit that got me a lot in this rewatch is it feels like, because this happened a bit in Salvage, but I feel it's worse here, is that it feels like there are scenes missing. Like, a lot of scenes missing.
Especially things like when they take the janitor in at the end.
Yeah, that was really jarring. But I was thinking more of when Trevor and Quentin team up to defeat the Fakir. Because they're suddenly walking down the corridor with walkie-talkies. The Fakir, in disguise as the janitor, turns back up at school, and they're unfazed by the fact the guy who's taken off by the FBI is back, and then call up Scully. But then they lure him into a closet because he's actually doing a janitorial job, and they try to throw acid on him, and Trevor falls into the acid, and that's...
Yeah, that bit got me is when Trevor climbs down, you see him fall into the acid and broken glass, and then in the next scene, he's kind of outside of the school and he looks fine.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, the setup is gone. All we got was Trevor saying, I think I know who killed your father, and then we're into childhood action-adventure thing, and then...
The very kind of like Goonies ending to it.
Yeah, it's almost like... Well, I think Shaban... We've never liked Shaban episodes.
No.
But I think there's a complete lack of focus, and it feels like the script was updated piecemeal. Like bits and pieces done at a time. But yeah, the janitor being arrested, that feels like it came out of nowhere, because there's no setup to it, is there?
No.
He's just suddenly in custody.
Yep.
Won't speak, so they've called in Chuck. It's nice to see Chuck.
This is his last appearance, apparently.
Is it? That's a shame.
It's a bad one to go out on.
It is. That might explain why he gets that second scene with Scully, because there was so much stuff from Chuck in this episode. I thought, is he actually the Fakir in disguise? No, wait, he can talk.
Yeah.
Which is a really stupid way of doing it, but it's when he comes in, though, and he's got the video camera because he's excited to try and capture one of these people on film. And, shows Doggett that, there's no one in the room.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the kernel of a great idea.
Yeah.
At the same time, how is the Fakir so bad at every other opportunity, given he can mimic people being the wrong place at the wrong time? How has anyone got a handle on him? How is he not unstoppable?
Yeah.
He's too powerful, and yet Scully shoots him dead.
Yeah. But doesn't.
Or, the ending sting is baffling. Because I remembered it being someone else.
Oh, okay. Like a different Fakir.
A different Fakir in the same kind of situation, and you thought, oh, okay, here we go again. Not, it's Deep Roy again. It's like, so, is he going to come and kill Scully and Doggett? No, of course he's not. He's going to go off and kill Deep Throat or something.
It's interesting. It just popped into my head now that I read a casting call thing for this, and it was something like, we need a all-Indian man who has no legs, and evidently that was a bit of a reach in Hollywood, I imagine. So that's why they wound up with it being Deep Roy, and that little trolley he's riding on is a kind of specially built one with like a hidden compartment that he's got his legs tucked into.
And that's all fine. I mean, it strikes me as weird that no one seems to specify really someone of short stature, given that makes it a little bit more plausible what he's doing.
Yeah.
Not much, but enough. But then if his size wasn't a factor in it, I don't know why, in the whole do the shrink to the atom, size of an atom kind of thing, why you'd bother making Deep Roy look so small.
I think, again, it's going in that fear of the uncanny sort of thing, which is a really, really bad mindset. And it's something that horror has been criticised for years, is the fact of he's not white, he's diminutive, and he's got no legs.
Yeah.
That's your thing. These things that are seen as being not normal, because we take the normal as being a healthy white person.
Yes.
And that's what we're playing up to be creepy, which, again, it's something that you saw in horror a lot up until, like, maybe the mid-90s, and now people are starting to subvert that more.
Yeah.
We get more of the idea of actually the well-to-do white man is terrifying. You're American psychos and stuff like that.
I will give you Tucker and Dale versus Evil, which I think is the great turn roundabout one.
Or if you want to go more modern, Barbarian.
Yes.
The weird thing's not what you've got to be afraid of, it's the white man.
Yes. It's safe to say, though, given we've every time we've done a John Saban specific episode, they've just been a complete catastrophe. As John Gilnitz, his worst impulses are tempered. They're not gone, because Gilnitz episodes also really kind of waver on the line. I'm not entirely sure why Vince Gilligan keeps on taking writing assignments with him. Vince, you're much better at this. why are you hanging around with Shaban? Why do you let him write on Breaking Bad and things?
His Breaking Bad episodes are fine.
I know. And I don't know if it's the whole he's curtailed by realism in a way that X-Files wasn't, and that forces him to sort of not do some of his worst impulses. But this one really is a contender for like one of the absolute worst episodes of the entire series.
I think you've got, and I did promise I'd bring this up, an argument to make for it if you are a pure gore fan. If you are a pure horror fan, because it does something interesting that you don't see in horror very often. It was the interesting thing about the original Alien movie is pregnancy horror is usually a horror that's aimed to make women uncomfortable. You're thinking things like Rosemary's Baby, because it's not something that men can experience.
Yep.
Whereas in Alien, the chestbursters can be implanted in anyone.
Yep.
So you finally have a way to make men feel uncomfortable by pregnancy horror. Which is also what you get in this.
Yes.
Is you have the concept of something growing inside a man and tearing its way out. And pregnancy horror that affects men is incredibly rare.
Yes.
So it was kind of interesting to see it illustrated in this. Unfortunately, I don't think it did enough to focus on that and how horrific that is.
No.
Other than, open and kill that guy and retroactively Quentin's dad, but he was already dead by this point.
Yeah.
The person needs to be conscious and aware to get the full horror home. It is the parasitic wasp effect. Because, in the insect world, which I keep coming back to because that's my background, I like bugs, parasitic wasps are something that people often say make them uncomfortable. They actually do an incredibly useful job in our ecosystem because they target pest species like caterpillars. But the idea is that they don't kill the prey they go for, they paralyze it so they can implant their eggs. The little caterpillar goes on as normal for a bit, then all of a sudden all these grubs burst out and hey, they've got a food source right there.
Yep.
But, that's the kind of terror of pregnancy horror. The person has to be unaware of what's happened to them until it's too late.
Yes.
I did find it surprisingly grisly when I first saw it, because even by X-Files terms, there is a lot of blood in this episode.
Grisly, in terms of grisliness and implications, it does work, but in terms of an actual fear factor, this is so inexplicable and confusing.
It's interesting, Paul Rabwin in particular hates this episode and said it's the one episode he would never make again.
Yeah.
But part of it, he said, was the over-focus on the dolly with the squeaky wheel, which he says, he thought it was a big mistake. They should have used some other form of transportation because it just undercuts everything.
Well, I suppose that's one thing we didn't get into, is that was also just confusing because they kind of tried to allude to that the janitor wheeling on his mop is meant to hide that.
Mm.
And sometimes yes, and then the rest of the time no, because sometimes I don't understand how he can be presenting himself as a janitor wheeling a mop around, and then the boy blinks and he's just the fakir sat there on his little wheelie thing.
There is a kind of space issue there as well, in the fact that you think if someone's shapeshifting, they should fill the same amount of space in how he's interacting with his environment around him. It's the, what I will call in anime terms, the Wolf's Rain effect.
That was such a headache.
Wolf's Rain is an old, still very popular anime, but an old one now. But ideally, they are wolves, they are normal wolves, but they can kind of project the image that they're human. But you get these weird discrepancies in things like what part of them is their hands, because sometimes you see it's like their wolf mouths when they're grappling things and things like that. But also, they can eat and talk with their normal human mouths. And just, I think, the mapping of having something that's quadrupedal, which essentially is like the man on the trolley as well, into something that's bipedal doesn't work in the correct way.
Yeah, that was very weird in Wolf's Rain.
Mm.
I think we do have to come back to a sort of thing we come back to every now and again of, what is Chris Carter doing? Because I think you said that the original idea for this, Carter said no to.
Yeah, the original idea of this episode was still focusing on that idea that Chuck mentions about how fakirs can turn themselves into atom-sized, basically, and it was going to pass into the guy's ear. And for some reason, Carter vetoed that, and that's when they went with what I believe fans call the butt genie instead.
That was your objection to it, Carter, not the rest of it, just the going into his ear bit.
Yep, apparently so.
Shall we stop talking about Badla and get out of here?
I think so, yeah. I think we've said enough.
We've said more than enough. Next time, we have Medusa and the Gift. Or is it the Gift of Medusa?
Other way around.
The Gift of Medusa. In the meantime, if you'd like to get hold of us, our email address is thingsgettingstrange42@gmail.com.
You can also find us on social media, and do please hook me up if you've got anything interesting relating to the X-Files you'd like me to share at the start of this show, including any conventions, fan events, zines, whatever you've got on the go at the moment. You can find us on Twitter and Tumblr at GetStrange42, on Mastodon at GetStrange42 at universedon.com, or on Facebook, where you can find us by searching for Things Are Getting Strange and X-Files Rewatch Podcast. Additionally, and if you're not sick of my voice right now, I also stream live on Twitch TV under the name AdverseCamber42. I am live Mondays and Wednesdays at 8pm GMT and Saturdays at 5pm GMT. I play a wide variety of PlayStation 5 games. At the moment, it's Yakuza Kiwami 2 and Bugsnax.
We have a Patreon, patreon.com/Things Are Getting Strange, where you can find our Let's Play of the first FMV game for the X-Files from 1998, where we die a lot. Our reviews of Mulder and Scully by Catatonia, of Goblins and Whirlwind by Charles Grant, and Ground Zero by Kevin J. Anderson. And find the answers to what we asked him about how you write an X-Files novel in the 90s. I don't think it's true anymore. Actually, it's probably similar-ish process, but...
Probably questions to ask Claudia Gray.
We could ask Claudia Gray. Any donation will be wonderfully accepted and help us keep the lights on. For now, our theme music is envisioned by Kevin MacLeod. You can find it on Computech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, please remember,
this time you stay dead.